So, although Toucannon may seem a bit bland at first, I think this Pokemon could really shine in the right circumstances. So, looking at its stats, his attack is above average at 120, but that's the only thing that really shines. His bulk is average at 80 HP and 75 in both defenses, and his speed is subpar, and he actually speed ties with a lot of Pokemon in this generation with base 60. His special attack is usable at 75, but he really only gets a very few moves that he could use well in the special attacking range, so he would be similar to something like Swellow as far as the random choice spec Toucannons that you may see running around. As far as his abilities go, Keen Eye is fairly useless because it only prevents accuracy loss, which really you don't see any of in the metagame. Skill Link means that any multi-hit moves that hit more than twice will always hit their maximum number of times. For Toucannon, this boosts 3 moves: Fury Attack, Rock Blast, and Bullet Seed. That means all 3 of those moves will get all 5 of their hits, which actually makes them pretty powerful. And in my opinion, this is the best ability for him. He also gets Sheer Force, which with some Pokemon such as Nidoking, who have a very wide move pool, they can utilize it very successfully. Toucannon simply doesn't have the moves to boast Sheer Force and make it the better ability. And what Sheer Force does, if you're not aware, is it makes it so moves with a secondary effect lose that effect, such as Ice Beam will no longer be able to freeze, but they gain power. And also, while running Sheer Force, if you use one of these moves that loses their secondary effect, you also do not take Life Orb damage. But with Toucannon, this simply isn't usable. One of the only moves he gets access to in the form of a Sheer Force move is Flame Charge or Flash Cannon. And Flash Cannon could be better if you were running a special Toucannon. Sheer Force probably would be the better ability, but with any kind of physical Toucannon, Sheer Force is next to useless. As far as his typing goes, he is a normal flying type, which is very common. That means he has 3 weaknesses that are very common offensive types, and he has 2 resistances as well as 2 immunities. His 2 immunities are actually pretty good because he completely walls Pokemon like Palossand because he blocks out both of Palosand's stab moves. Now, how often you see Toucannon versus Palossand in a Gen 7 battle is another conversation altogether, because really I don't see either of the 2 being used very, very commonly. So if we get to the first set that I designed for Toucannon, you'll see that it is a Choice Scarf set, and it's very similar to Cinccino from Generation 6 and how people tend to run it, except more often than not the Cinccino could be Choice Scarfed or Choice Banded. I tended to see more Choice Band sets, but Toucannon needs the extra speed as opposed to the extra power. Because of this, I also threw on a Jolly Nature to make sure he was outspeeding as much as possible, with max speed, max attack of course, and 4 in either defense. It really doesn't matter. His attacks are U-turn obviously for momentum, so you don't get locked into something that may be bad and your opponent could capitalize on. Brave Bird, because what's wrong with a 120 base power recoil move on a Pokemon with base 120 attack? It's proven to be a very good move in this meta, and I think he could run it very successfully. For the last 2 moves, it really depends on if you'd rather have coverage or stab. So as I mentioned earlier, with Skill Link, you get 3 moves that are boosted. Fury Attack on any Pokemon that all of the Skill Link moves hit neutrally on. Fury Attack is your better bet because of the stab it gains. But Bullet Seed and Rock Blast are able to hit other Pokemon super effectively. Bullet Seed is really good for breaking through rock types that normally wall the starting bird, and Rock Blast is good for taking down things like other flying types and ice types that may like to switch in on you. So really, the last 2 moves of this set are personal preference. Other moves that I thought were interesting on Toucannon: it actually gets Flame Charge, which we'll be going over a set with that in a moment, which I thought was very, very interesting for this Pokemon because it doesn't really look like something that would be able to use that move. Drill Peck and Brick Break are 2 other coverage moves that could be run on him. Drill Peck really only needs to be run because it would prevent recoil damage, but you lose so much power, I just don't see it being worth it in the long run. And Brick Break is just fighting type coverage in case you decided not to run Bullet Seed or Rock Blast or Fury Attack. Swords Dance is an interesting move on this Pokemon because doubling its attack would make it very hard to switch into, but because of its low speed but inability to be run well in a Trick Room, I just don't see it having the chance to set up very often. It gets Roost and Substitute. It has enough bulk to be able to potentially set up a sub if you know your opponent's going to switch. Then maybe you could get up a Swords Dance or a Flame Charge, but this is very situational and I could see it working very little. He also gets Overheat, Boom Burst, and Flash Cannon. So if you decided to run a Choice Spec set or a Special Choice Scarf set, it would probably run Overheat, Boom Burst, Flash Cannon, and probably a Hidden Power or maybe even Roost if you were to expect your item to get knocked off. And these moves, while they are very powerful, his special attack at only 75 really isn't doing him much in the way of tons of damage and guaranteed one-hit KOs, but this could be a nice surprise. The final move he gets is Beak Blast, which is a move I believe is signature to him. And what it does is it's a move very, very similar to Focus Punch, except if your opponent hits you when you use this move, it burns them. Now, at first, this did not seem the best to me at all. In fact, at first I thought it was a negative priority move, so it would activate at the end of the turn, and then your opponent could just switch out and avoid the effect. Now that I know that it's a one-turn move very similar to Focus Punch, it's actually got more use. Even then, though, it's still hard to use it properly, and your opponent will probably knock you out with a special attack, because most ice and electric moves are special. They always tend to be Ice Beam, Volt Switch, Thunderbolt on Pokemon that have higher special attack. So this move has the ability to be run properly, but I just don't see a case in which it should be run over the always reliable Brave Bird. Now, another set that could be run is very similar to the last one, except you would put leftovers on this Pokemon. You would run either an Adamant or a Jolly Nature, probably still Jolly so you get as much speed as possible. And then from there you could run Flame Charge, your Flying Stab, and 2 of the moves that are utilized by Skill Link. And really that's all there is to this Pokemon. There are very well other sets that could be run, and another set may come out of the meta, but I just don't see this Pokemon being used very much, and it could be dropped to a lower tier very quickly.